In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started working with charts in Telerik reporting. And I've actually created a project previous to this with a few reports already created. And the data set that these reports are going to be using today is actually the store sales data set. And this data set is retrieving all of its data from the AdventureWorks database, which is a free database that you can get from Microsoft. The first chart that we're going to generate today is actually going to be kind of a dashboard chart. We're not going to bind a report to any data. We're actually just going to create a single page and show a chart on that shows the top 5 stores in the AdventureWorks database that have the top sales for the year. And we're going to be using the store queue top 5 table adapter to retrieve those stores. So let's take a look at the query that I've created for this. I'm going to go ahead and copy this query out and show you the kind of data that it returns. So I'm going to switch over here to SQL Management Studio. And I'll go ahead and paste that in, and I'll just go ahead and execute this. And as you can see, it retrieves the top 5 stores that have the top sales for quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. And it also gives me the total for all of those quarters. So let's switch back over to Visual Studio now, and let's go ahead and set up the chart to display this data in one of our reports. I'm going to use this report, the top 5 performing stores report. So let's go ahead and open that up. And over in the toolbox, I'm going to actually drag out a chart now from our available Telerik reporting controls. And I'll go ahead and resize this so it looks nice in our report. Let's set this chart up to be a stacked bar chart. So over here in the Properties window, I'm going to scroll down to the default type property for our chart. Let's see where that is. Here it is. And I'm going to switch that out to be a stacked bar chart. And let's also update the orientation of this chart so that it's displayed horizontally, because I think the data will look a lot nicer this way. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and bind our data. And to do that, we're actually going to use the need data source event provided on the chart. And this event's actually going to get called whenever this chart is displayed on the report, so that you can specify the data to display in the chart. So I'm going to double click that and create the event handler for it. And now I'll go ahead and paste in some code that I have available. So when this particular event gets called, the chart actually gets passed in via the sender object in the event handler. And to turn this back into a chart, all we need to do is cast it as a telerik.reporting.processing.chart object. And once that's available to us, all we need to do is set the data source on the chart, and in this case we're going to set it to that data that we're going to retrieve from our table adapter that gets the top 5 stores with the best sales for the year. So now that we have our data source set up, let's go ahead and save this, and I'm going to build it real quick. And let's switch back over to the report designer and click preview and see what this looks like. So here's our report. So we have all of our different quarters listed here in the legend, and you can see all of our various data for the different stores. Well, right now the style of this chart isn't very good. We can't really tell which store particular pieces of data are coming from. And so the next step we're going to take is to actually format and style the chart so that we can make it more readable. So let's switch back over to the report designer now, and let's update the styles for this chart. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to display the different stores associated with the values that we're retrieving from the database. And to do that, I'm actually going to use a property on our x-axis called the data labels column. So let's go ahead and open that up over here in the properties window now. And that'll be under plot area and under x-axis. And here's the property that I'm referring to. And this property, we're going to set it to the column in our database where the data labels for the x-axis should be retrieved from. So if we jump back over here to SQL Management Studio, as you can see, this first column here, the store name column, contains some nice readable values that are the different names of the stores associated with our data. So let's plug the store name column into that property. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in here. And now that we have those, let's go ahead and update the y-axis as well so we can tell what those values are supposed to be. So I'm going to close out the x-axis property and switch over here to the y-axis property. And let's change the label on it. So I'm going to expand axis label, and we'll set this label to be visible. And for the text block, I can actually set a text property that I want to display for this. And we'll call it US dollars, and it will be in the thousands. And now that we have both of those set, I'm going to go ahead and save the chart once again, and let's take a look at the preview. So as you can see now, over here to the left, it's kind of cut off, but it's retrieving the values for the different store names from the database now. And down here at the bottom, it's a little bit cut off as well, but I now have a label for my axis down here, so you can tell what these different numbers mean. So the next thing I want to update is actually the plot area once again. As you can see, the different series items that are being displayed kind of have really large decimal places, and they're kind of overlapping. I want to set this up so I can minimize the amount of decimal places just to be 2 for each of these different items. So let's switch back over to the designer once again, and we'll set that up. I'm going to go ahead and go over here to the properties window. We'll select the chart first. And down here we can actually preset our series so we can apply some formatting to them. So we're going to have 4 series in this chart, 1 for each quarter. So I'll go ahead and add those. And for our first series, I'm going to set it up to be Q1. And the column it's responsible for in the database will be the Q1 column. And I can also specify the formatting on here. I don't like those large decimal places, so I'm going to reduce that to 2. And to do that, I just update the default label value here under the labels section, and I'm going to place a curly bracket, and then I can specify any number format I want, and in this case I'll just use N2, which will return an integer with 2 decimal places. So now that this is set up, I'm going to go ahead and set up all of the rest of these to refer to the different quarters as well. So now all of our different series are set up to refer to the different quarters. Let's go ahead and take a look at the preview for this now and see how it looks. So as you can see, all of my different values for the series are nicely formatted now. I don't have several decimal places anymore. I've restricted it down to 2, so it's a lot more readable and it looks a lot nicer. So now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and fix this issue with our text getting cut off on the left and on the bottom now. So back in the designer, we're actually going to adjust the margins of the plot area. So I'll select the chart and let's scroll back down to the plot area property, and under appearance and then under dimensions is where you'll find the margins for the plot area. So I'm going to update these. I'll update the top, and the top will be 25%, and as you can see the plot area kind of jumped down a little bit there. And for the right, I'm going to change that to 10% because I'm going to actually move the legend here in a second. And for the bottom, I'll switch that to 16%. And then for the left, I'll switch that to 25%. And now that we've set this up, we should be able to see our text a little bit better here on the left. And as you can see, we can already see our text here on the bottom. There's one more thing I want to do before we do another preview. I'm actually going to set the text that displays in these labels over here to wrap so that they display on multiple lines. So to do that, let's jump back over here to the properties window. I'm going to close out that appearance property, and let's expand into the x-axis property and then into the appearance for the x-axis. And then inside of here, I'm going to once again expand into another property, the text appearance property. And this is the property that defines how those labels display. And in here, I'm going to simply set the auto text wrap property to true, and that'll wrap those labels for us. So now that that's set up, let's go ahead and do another preview of our chart. So as you can see here to the left, the labels are a lot more readable because the margins have been extended and the text has also been wrapped. And here on the bottom, you can also see the label for this axis because the margins have been extended there as well. There's still a few more things we need to do with this chart to make it look a little bit nicer, and that's to update the chart title and also the legend. So let's switch back over to the designer and we'll take care of the chart title first. So over here in the properties window for our chart, we can update the title through the use of the chart title property. And inside of here, I'm going to select the text box property. And let's change the title for our chart to the top 5 performing stores. And as you can see, it's updated here in the designer. And I'm going to switch back to that once again. And the next thing we want to update for this is the margins. And so I'm going to expand the appearance property for this, and then the dimensions property, and then the margins property once again. And let's change the top to 2%, and we'll change the right to be 10 or 10 pixels, which it already is. And for the bottom, let's change that to 1. And then for the left, let's change that to 7%, which it already is. So the next thing we want to do is to update the legend so that's more readable. So let's go ahead and close out the chart title property. And let's switch over to the legend property now. And inside of the legend, I'm going to expand the appearance property for this. And then for overflow, let's go ahead and change this value to be row, so that our legend is displayed in a row of items. And we also need to update the position of our legend. So I'm going to change the aligned position to be the top of our chart. And then finally, we need to update the margins for this as well. So I'm going to expand the dimensions property once again. And inside of margins, I'll go ahead and set all of those. So for the top, that'll be 14%. And for the right, I'm going to set that to 2%, and the bottom and the left are all right. So now that we've set that up, there is actually one more thing we need to do, and I'm going to get rid of the border on the legend so that it's not being overlapped by the chart title. So I'm going to expand the border property, and I'll just set it to its visibility to false. Now that that's set up, let's go ahead and take a look at the preview once again. So as you can see, our chart is now complete. It's nicely formatted. To the left, we can see all of our labels, and on the bottom, we can see the label for the axis. The title's formatted nicely, and then we can see here in our legend what everything displayed in this chart means. So now that we've completed this report, let's go ahead and take a look at a different kind of report. The report that we just made is actually not bound directly to any data source, although the chart that we were using in the report was bound to a data source. For the next report, we're going to be using the store performance report, which I previously made. And this report is bound to a data source. It's bound to the store sales data set. And it's going to be retrieving every single store inside of the AdventureWorks database, and it's going to display the same exact kind of chart, but it's going to be, individually targeted per store instead of showing an overall view. So let's take a look at our data set that we're going to be using for this. Inside of our data set, as you can see, I have a store data table and then the store queue single data table. And the store data table I'm actually going to be using to display every single store in the entire AdventureWorks database in my report. And for the store queue single, I actually have a table adapter here with a custom method on it that will retrieve the quarterly information based on a customer ID, and i.e. this customer ID that it's going to come from our store. So let's jump back over to the report once again. And as you can see, I'm displaying the name for the particular store that's being shown in the report. And then here for our chart once again, it actually looks incredibly similar to the one that we just made. And inside of the event handling for this, I've set up an event for the need data source event. And inside of this, it's kind of similar to last time where I'm retrieving the chart. The sender is the chart, and I cast it to our chart processing object. The difference now is that I need the item that's being processed as well. And from the item, I can simply cast it as a data row view and retrieve the customer ID field from that data item. And once I have that available to me, Using my table adapter, I can simply pass in that customer ID into the getData method, and that'll return me the quarterly information specific to this particular store. So now that I've shown you this, let's jump back over to our report, and I'm going to go ahead and hit preview, and let's see how it works. So as you can see, our first store doesn't contain any valid information, but as we scroll down, we can begin to see, every single store that's been pulled from our database and the quarterly information specific to those individual stores. So it's pretty simple to set up this kind of binding as well. So that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed learning about all the different things you can do with charting inside of Telerik reports. Thanks for watching.